Oh, what's up, everyone? I was looking down to reply to a comment on the thread, and I look up, and there's 1 second left. I caught myself a bit by surprise today. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to The Altar with me, your host, Colby Martin, here in San Diego, where it's just too hot for sleeves. So you're just going to have to deal with my flesh today. You're going to have to deal with my flesh. My duplicitous flesh bag, as my friend Flamey Grant likes to call it. Not mine, although maybe mine in particular. All of our flesh bags of duplicitousness. Super excited today to talk about a couple things with you, but most notably, I'm going to try this new segment out. A segment I'm calling Progressive Christian Pastor Corner, or otherwise known as PCPC. And I'll explain it more in a minute, although there's not much to explain. It's basically a time to talk with other progressive Christian pastors. So all that and more coming up on The Altar today. So glad you're with us. Let's get into it. Lovely, lovely, lovely. What a great little intro video. James, sorry for missing your San Diego so much. I love it here. I could understand living here and then not living here would be hard. I would also miss it. I'm not actually sure where I would go that feels like an upgrade. I feel like this, when it's called America's Finest City, I kind of believe it. Maybe Kauai. Maybe if I went and moved in Kauai, then I would feel like as an upgrade. What's up, Shane from New York? I'm glad it is nice and cool there. It is not cool here in San Diego. So oftentimes people don't know that September is like the hottest month here in San Diego. So here we are. My brother is out golfing without me, jerk. And he just drove the green from the blues. That is really freaking impressive. He's driven it before from the whites, but never from the blues. So I'm really proud of you, Logan. Good luck on your round today. I remember the days when I used to beat my little brother in golf every time. Like I won for like 2 decades. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, he surpassed me. And now I don't win anymore, ever. I think I've won once in like 5 years. But we did discover recently that it might be not so much that he's gotten better than me, although I think that is still true, but also he has far superior equipment. And we realize that plays a lot into it. I got old crappy clubs. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Hey, I've got a little thing I like to call the viewer check-in. So I've got a question for all of you watching on the YouTubes and or the Facebooks and also Twitch. I'm streaming to Twitch now. I don't know if anybody ever watches, but I'm like, sure, I'll click that. And then Twitter. I don't know if anybody watches, but why not stream there? Why not? So here we are. Viewer sound off. What do you got for me? And the question today is this. Is it going to come on screen? Where are you? There it is. What's your favorite reality TV show? Okay, now before you laugh, I know that maybe 10 years ago, it was popular to like poo-poo reality TV, like out loud. Inside, most people were probably secretly harboring the few shows that they enjoyed watching, but it was kind of fun to like culturally like look askance at reality TV. I feel like those days are behind us. I feel like now not only have we embraced that it's just a part of our culture, but I feel like we now appreciate it maybe more than we did 10 years ago. So my favorite reality TV show of all time, and honestly, it's probably in my top 6 favorite TV shows, period, is Survivor. And Survivor comes back on the air tonight. And our family and our family's family and our family's family, which is like our little friends and family unit down here, we're all getting together for a big viewing party at our house tonight to watch the season premiere of season 41. That's right, 41. If you don't watch Survivor, that number might shock you. It's been on the air for 20 years. Season premieres tonight, and I'm so freaking excited. Can't wait to see Jeff Probst again. Can't wait for the theme music. Oh, yo, 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 yo. I just freaking love this show. Missed it all last year. Obviously, they didn't record because of the pandemic, but it's recorded and it's coming back, and it's my favorite reality show of all time. What is your favorite reality TV show? And I suppose you could throw a little bit of shade and be like, I don't watch reality TV. Well, then you're a superior human than I am. But what is your favorite? Brooke says, don't blame the equipment. No, Brooke, that's totally fair. I have hesitated giving any credit to that. It's my brother who I think has led the charge to be like, yeah, when you play with my clubs, you hit just as far as I do. And anyway, but you're right. Logan is just better than me. We don't need to blame the equipment. Okay, speaking of Logan, while he's golfing, he's still watching The Altar. That's commitment. Logan, who will be here tonight for the viewing party, says Survivor and Master Chef. Actually, I don't know if I've ever watched Master Chef. Shane's favorite reality TV show is Lords and Ladles. It's a cooking show from Ireland. Unfortunately, no longer on Netflix. That's fun. Big Brother. Oh, come on, Troy. That's like that's in my top 4 of reality TV show. My wife and I, that's sort of like our are we guilty? If we have to pick a guilty pleasure, which maybe you shouldn't feel guilty for experiencing pleasure, but like that's ours. That's ours that we're like, we look down on people who watch The Bachelor, but we watch Big Brother. So really enjoying this season. We haven't watched the most recent episode, but anyway, super fun this season to watch the cookout do their thing. Really incredible. Anyway, we love Big Brother. It takes over our entire summer. Great British Baking Show, says Susan. Such a good show. And I just love how, over in the UK, you could give yourself to this show, this competition that takes over months of your life. And if you win the whole thing, you get a plate. You get a serving tray that's engraved. Like no cash prize. Like in America, you'd win $1 million for winning the Great Britain. But over in Great Britain, they're like, here is a cake tray. And they're just thrilled. And a bouquet of flowers. But we love that show. Love watching that show with the fam. John Jacobson specifies not just Master Chef, but Master Chef Australia. Do they make different foods down there? America's Got Talent from James. Yes, Brooke, they have an American Big Brother, I believe. Actually, I was going to say I think it started here, but I don't actually. That's entirely probably not true. That's probably my American exceptionalism. We started this trash TV, of course. Zumbo, yes, I love Zumbo. That's the Adriana Zumbo, right? Who was also on one of the judges on the Sugar Rush. That's a fun one. We watched that, a couple seasons of that. Chopped. So basically what I'm discovering here is people like the food reality TV shows, which is a great choice. I also like the foods. Anyway, so hopefully if you are a fan of Survivor like I am, I wish you well tonight as the season premiere. We're going to have Hawaiian shave ice to celebrate. We're going to have some nice, yummy rum cocktails. Like we're going to get the island theme going on and imagine ourselves in Fiji, but I don't really want to be on the show. That sounds miserable. I'd love to be on Amazing Race. That's a show that I would love to be on, and I love watching it. But I only love watching Survivor. Would not want to be on it. All right, this has been the Viewer Sound Off. Thank you. So yesterday was an exciting day for me. Yesterday, September 21st, 2021, marked the 5-year anniversary of my first book, Unclobber. Where's the applause? 5 years, people. It's kind of fascinating to me. On one hand, I feel like 5 years isn't that long of a time. You know what I mean? It's like only 5 years ago. And then on the other hand, it feels like this thing has been out forever. Like this has been a part of my life for so many years, which is kind of true because before it was a book, it was a YouTube lecture series. Before that, it was a teaching series. So I've been working on this material since 2011. So yeah, it's been a decade of my life. So maybe that's why it feels longer. But yesterday was the 5-year anniversary. The book came out September 21st, 2016. And I'm really freaking proud of it. I really can't wrap my head around around what it means that this book has had the impact that it's had. Like almost every day I get messages from people around the world that talk about the impact this book has had on their life. And never would I have imagined, well, a couple of things. Never would I really imagine that I would have gotten to write a book. It's always been a bucket list of mine. So the fact that I got to do it and now do it twice is incredible. But I never would imagine that the book would reach as many people as it has. I think, so the first year, the sales were fine. Then the second year dipped a little bit. And then every year after that, it's just sold more and more copies. Like the shelf life on this thing has been pretty phenomenal. And on one hand, that's a bit of a bummer, right? Like, well, it's kind of both and. Like I want the book to do well for many reasons. One of which is because, rethinking our misuse of the Bible and homosexuality, there's a whole lot of people that still need to rethink how the Bible's been misused. So this work of undoing the damage of the clobber passages is far from over. And yet also, I kind of hope that at some point the sales will start to go the other way and this book becomes irrelevant and obsolete. You know what I mean? Like, I hope we're at the point, like within a reasonable amount of time from now, where this conversation is more or less like behind us. Like, oh, how adorable that back in 2021, people were still buying a book like Unclobber. But that's not where we're at yet. So I love that this book still resonates with people. I love the number of people that are like, I've purchased so many copies for my friends and family. I love to give it away. Speaking of giveaways, by the way, to celebrate the 5-year anniversary, I'm going to give away 2 copies. So many books on the screen. I'm going to give away 2 copies to 2 random winners tomorrow on Instagram. So starting at 8 a.m. on my Instagram, that's at Colby Martin, you can enter to win a copy. And it's going to run for 24 hours. Here's what you got to do to win. You just got to make sure you follow me. Then you got to comment on the post and tag a couple friends that you think would appreciate Unclobber. What I'm going to do is then I'm going to take everybody who's entered and randomly pick a winner. You get a free book, and then I'm going to send a free book to one of your friends that you tagged. I'm going to pick one of those at random as well. Okay. So if you would like a free copy, and if you already have the book and you still want to enter, you can win it on behalf of someone else. Like when I ask you what your address is, just tell me, actually, I want you to ship it to my Aunt Carol in Missouri. So here's Aunt Carol's address, and I'll send it to Aunt Carol as well as your friend that you tagged. So I'm going to sign some copies and I'm going to give them away. That starts tomorrow on Instagram. So I've been celebrating this week. I did this post yesterday on the anniversary, and then I did a post today where I shared a screenshot of the number one most helpful, people have ranked the most helpful review on Amazon. So you know how when you scroll down to the reviews on Amazon, you can filter it by most recent or most helpful. And I think the default is always most helpful. And I don't really fully understand the algorithm of how all this works, but you can like vote on what reviews are helpful. And yesterday, the one that was at the top of the most helpful review for him. And keep in mind, Unclobber has like 550 reviews, and it, the review is like 4.7 stars. So most people that have reviewed, review very positively. But the one that is the most helpful, you can see there where it says 41 people found this helpful. Trying to make it a little bit larger to read. Comes from Books Harmon. So this sits at the top. And it's a 1-star review and just simply titled Lies, which is adorable. And Brooks Harmon wrote, when one writes a book and changes the word of God to suit his sin, all it bad. I think we get the gist of what they're saying, even though it's kind of hard to understand where the sentence fell off at the end there. And then he writes, the author and I worship a very different God and read a very different Bible. and then the classic just putting Bible references and then says it all. I didn't even bother looking those up, by the way. I'm so over the days of just sort of copy pasting Bible references. I'm like, if I don't have it memorized, then I'm not going to look it up because I have a feeling it won't says it all. But anyway, so this was the number one most helpful review. And so I did a post this morning reflecting on this. And I shared, first of all, like, and this is true about our church as well. So if you go to like Sojourn Grace's, like the Google reviews, you know, and you read a couple of the really negative reviews, really what it does is it highlights, it's like a dog whistle to the people who would want to like visit our church or who would want to read a book like that. It's like, okay, I'm on the right track. If someone like Brooks Harmon is making those sorts of observations, so that's what one of my observations like is, hey, Brooks, thanks for the help. Like you're really just helping people know that they want to read this book. And then two, like when you say that you and I, Brooks, worship a very different God, I totally agree with you. Spot on. Spot on. Like the God that I worship is full of love and kindness and compassion and specifically loves LGBTQ people just as they are. Whereas I'm assuming that the God that you worship is kind of a hard, distant, overly moralistic, like cares about people's sex lives. Just a very different God, 100%. And then the Bible that you and I read is also very different. I would imagine your Bible feels like some sort of instruction manual on how to win at life, on how to believe the right things, on who's in and who's out. Your Bible probably is helpful for judging others and pointing out other people's sin all it bad, as you say. And that's not the Bible that I read. So yeah, Brooks. Anyway, thank you for your helpful review, Brooks. You might have meant to steer people away from it, but I think you've actually done probably the opposite. So then I shared that post. I shared this screenshot today on my Instagram, and like within hours, I love you guys. Within hours, people went and voted other reviews to be more helpful. So now if you go there, you'll see one more person found Brooks as helpful. It went from 41 to 42, which is, I think I get a kick out of that too. But then these other ones, like the review from T Mark Hightower and the review from Amazon Customer, are now at 45 and 48 votes, respective votes. So I don't know if Amazon's going to eventually usurp Brooks Harmon's review. Like, I don't know. Again, I don't fully understand the algorithm, but now at least Brooks Harmon's review is no longer the most helpful in terms of votes. So thank you to all of you who played along in that game with me. Anyway, so I got a kick out of that. But anyway, 5-year anniversary. I can't believe it. And I've got some more fun, exciting announcements about this specifically that I'm going to drop next week as a way to continue to celebrate the anniversary of this. And then I can't say anything yet, but it's possible that come springtime of next year, there's going to be another announcement in the Unclobber world. That's super fun. All right. Let's get that off the screen. Oh, and then I'll say this before I bring on my guest. I've also, as you know, I've got my perspective shift, my weekly perspective shift article over on Substack, which has now been, by the way, new URL. You can just go to perspectiveshift.co. None of that colbymartin.substack.com nonsense. Just perspectiveshift.co. How helpful is that? And tomorrow I'm going to put up a bit of the story of how this book came to be, in terms of like the publishing part of it, and how I got connected with Jessica from Westminster and ended up putting together a proposal and all that. So I think that'll be fun. Starts with this video here on my YouTube channel where I gave a talk at a conference, which then later that night led to me and Glennon Doyle burning things in the parking lot. You're gonna have to read the story tomorrow. So that's gonna be on Perspective Shift tomorrow. So just head over to perspectiveshift.co and sign up for that. And you can definitely read all my past articles. But tomorrow, if you sign up for it, you'll get this in your inbox when it gets sent out. I was gonna say tomorrow at 8 a.m., but I'm not sure if I'm going to have it ready by then. But it will be ready by tomorrow of this, I'm sure. So that is tomorrow on the Perspective Shifts. Okay. Oh, thank you for the kind words, Odette. Odette says it's an awesome book. I love that. Brooke says, love the book. Thank you. Oh, and then Brooke says about to read The Shift. Let me know what you think. That's my second book. Came out last year, right after the world shut down. Wah, wah. What else? Oh, Gustavo, you're going to have to go follow me on Instagram. All right? Follow me on Instagram and enter to win. Crystal, thank you for reading it. It's way more fun to write books when people read them. And then Emily says this, Josh Scott is my pastor, and Josh Scott is also my guest on this brand new segment that I'm calling Progressive Christian Pastor Corner, otherwise known as PCPC. And the idea is simple. I identify as a progressive Christian. I've talked about that a lot here on the altar. You can go to my YouTube channel and look at past videos, and I talk about why I still call myself a Christian, why the idea of progressive and Christian are not oxymoron, all that stuff I've addressed before. And I've been a pastor now for almost 20 years. Specifically a progressive Christian pastor for like 10. And it's a unique job. It's a unique role that we play. And I thought might be fun occasionally. And by fun, honestly, people, it might just be fun for me. It might be too insider talk. I don't really know. There might be some of you who are like, just get sort of bored by listening to two pastors talk, which is fine. Others might find it interesting. Sometimes you got to do things just, to energize yourself. So I thought I'm going to bring on occasionally some of my friends who are also in this line of work, who also identify as progressive Christian and are pastors, and just talk with them about it and share stories and explore this phenomena of being a PCP. All right. That's right, Corey. Get a little more Josh today. So without further ado than I've already done, let's get to PCPC. What's up, Josh Scott? Welcome to the show again. Did you unmute yourself? Guest has muted themselves.
Oh, do I have to? There we go.
There you
What's
go.
up, Colby?
Hello, Josh. Good to have you on. This is your second time being with me.
It's my second time, and I can't remember. The first time was like over the summer or in the spring or something.
Yeah.
And the reason it's so memorable is my kids were still home because the world was still weird.
I remember this.
And like over here, I was in the kitchen, and over here, one of my kids, what nobody saw that I was like witnessing from my peripheral vision, was one of my kids become so angry with the other that she picked up one of my flip-flops and started beating him in the head with it. And so I am literally just like snapping my fingers, like just talking to you and just doing this, like just it was something.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had no idea. You played it off pretty well while one of your children was what's the abuela
Assault.
from yeah, I was thinking about the movie Coco, and the abuela from Coco who takes off her shoes and goes after the young boy. Yeah. And I have some Mexican friends who are like, oh my God, that's exactly like my abuela did the same exact thing. So I don't know, maybe your daughter has some Mexican heritage way back in her ancestry.
She's really good at it. Really good at it.
Josh, I like you. I miss you. By the way, were you a Wild Goose, or were you just Wild Goose adjacent? Yeah. Okay, you were there.
I was there.
I wasn't there. How was your experience?
It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was smaller because of the time of year and because of COVID, but it felt safe. It felt like just to see people I hadn't seen, and well, usually it would have been a year, but because of COVID, it had been 2 years because we didn't do Goose last year, and so I missed you. I was hoping you'd be there.
Yeah, I missed you guys too. Kate and I there's a window of our life where we were planning to go, and then the window closed. And we're like, never mind. What are we doing? This is a really bad idea. So hopefully next year. I hope they keep it in September. Do you know if they're going to move it back to July?
It's going back to July.
Yeah, that makes it
And
really hard for us.
I have to tell you, September was just great. It was cooler. It was just a whole other.
Yeah.
Less
July in the
sweaty.
hills of North Carolina, not great. All right. Well, maybe I'm not going next year because it's always falling on the weekend of Pride here in San Diego, and that's a big weekend for our church. So it's been.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Anyway, you're not on here to defend or to evangelize Wild Goose. I was just curious. You are here to defend Christianity. Go. No, I'm just
I have
kidding.
no desire.
Don't want to do it. Before we get into that, though, I'm conscious of. Do you remember this book when I came out and hung out with you?
Well, how could we ever forget, Colby?
There were some things that
That
happened that weekend.
It was election 2016.
There were some things that happened.
So you need to come back and see me again because we have a lot of redeeming to do.
Man. Yeah. So for those who may not remember, back in 2016 in America, there was an election for the 40-something president of our United States. And Unclobber came out September 2016. The next 6 or 8 weeks, I was doing kind of these tours. I was around the country, and one of them was you visiting when you were in Kentucky at the time.
Yep.
And so you very kindly and graciously brought me out and gave me the platform at your church to share and talk about Unclobber, which was super awesome. And then you booked a gig at a nearby college, and I got to talk to a classroom full of professors and university students, which was super fun.
And then they bought us beer and pizza afterwards.
They bought us
made it all worth my
beer
while.
and pizza. Honestly, I remember that pizza well. That was really fun. And then the next night we were like, well, we got nothing to do. Let's just watch these election results and welcome in Hillary Rodham Clinton as the country's first female president. And so we go to a beer store that afternoon, and we walk in and we ask the guy, because we saw that Hillary was from Chicago. We're like, let's get a Chicago beer to celebrate Hillary's victory. So the guy helps us find the one beer in the whole store. I don't even remember what it was. I just remember it was from Chicago. We bought the 6-pack and we took it back to your house, and we're like, we'll wait and we'll crack it open once MSNBC calls it. That was the height of our optimism for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
It just went downhill from there.
Yeah, I remember driving you to the airport the next morning, just like, what just happened to us?
Yeah, we were in shock.
And it ended up being even worse than I imagined.
And
what I
say more
imagined
about
was
that. What do you
bad.
mean? Yeah.
Well, just the whole Trump presidency. I
Okay.
mean, I imagined it would be bad, but I imagined that there might have been people within his party with a spine, maybe, who would stop some of this stuff. And they ended up stacking the Supreme Court. They ended up, and we're still feeling the effects
Yeah.
of people are like, oh, it's only 4 years. We'll get it next time. Well, no, actually it's going to be a lot more than 4 years. I mean, what we see happening in Texas and all that with the Supreme Court, I think it's just a mess. So yeah, we need to redo it. We need to have you out again at Gracepointe, get new beers,
New church, new book, new president,
new beers.
new beers. I like this plan a lot. Yeah, you're at a new church now. You're at this church called Gracepointe with an E. What's the story behind
With
the
an
E?
So
Do you know the story behind the E? Is there a
I
story?
don't know. I don't know this. I mean, E just feels fancy, doesn't it? It's like when they put an extra P and an E on the end of shop, so it's like chape. Like
I never thought about
because
that.
we want to.
So you guys
because we
serve
want
ice
to,
cream?
like-
Is that the point?
No, now we meet in a bar.
Okay.
So I make this joke all the time, but it's Gracepointe Bar and Grill. Like we're no longer just a church; we're now a bar and grill.
That's awesome. You've been there for how long now?
So I started in April 2019. So like around 2.5 years. I'm heading to my 3rd year anniversary,
Okay.
which is hard to believe. I was at the church in Kentucky for 14 years. I mean,
Wow.
I was a child when I started there. It feels like.
Yeah. Can you take me back to your childhood? Maybe not all the way
start.
back, but I'm curious. So again, part of the idea of the segment here is just talk about other progressive Christian pastors, talk to other progressive Christian pastors about the unique role of being a progressive Christian pastor. And I think one of the things I'm curious about is, why did you get into this vocation in the first place? So that's one question. And then after you share a bit about that, I'm also curious why you're still in it, because I imagine those might be very different. There might be some overlap, but they're probably not the exact same. I don't know. We're about to find out. So take us back to your childhood. And when little Joshy was like, Mama, I want to be a pastor.
That is not what happened.
Okay.
So, when I was a kid, I grew up Free Will Baptist. We later, after my grandfather died, he was a Free Will Baptist pastor. After my grandpa died, we became Southern Baptist, which everybody saw as a liberal shift. So that tells you kind of, what I grew up, King James only. We didn't even know who was going to preach when we went to church. My grandfather was the pastor, but like he would just sort of sense, you didn't know what songs were going to be sung. Everything was spontaneous. And so people would be picking songs and singing them. And then it would be so-and-so, brother so-and-so is going to preach. And then there'd be one more song so brother so-and-so could open his Bible and start flipping through it to find, what in the world am I going to talk about today?
So brother so-and-so may not have known they were going to preach that day.
He definitely did not know.
Okay. It was always brother.
Sometimes it was always brother.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
And sometimes it would be brother so-and-so is going to open and brother so-and-so is going to close, which means we'd been very bad and we got two preachers that week.
Wow.
But I grew up, my grandfather was the pastor and he walked on water for me. And there's a whole convoluted story. He died when I was 11 and he died during a church business meeting. He died during a church business meeting after somebody in the church told him he was the problem and he should go away. Like literally had a massive heart attack and fell over. And so that was the moment for me where I was like, I do not want anything to do with church. I do not want anything to do with God.
Whoa.
And I sure didn't want to be a pastor because now the connotation in my mind was, if you're a pastor, the church will kill you.
Yeah.
And so I sort of had, just didn't pay attention for a long time, even though we kept going to church and all that.
Did you ever meet the person who said that?
I was in the room when it happened.
Why was an 11-year-old in the room? Why were you at a church business meeting?
Because everybody went. This was at Eastern Kentucky Holler Church, man. This was not like this was just a Saturday night business meeting.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's a whole story around that.
Oh my God.
And so like when people ask me, when did you start deconstructing your faith? I was like 11. 11. But so I remember when I somehow ended up around the age 14, 15, being a leader in this youth group at our Southern Baptist church. And when I was 6, like I'm now, I'll be 40 on Sunday. So now I'm at the point now where things start, like what ages things happened are a little bit mythical.
Yeah.
But 16 or 17, the music minister at our church came to me and said, "Hey, you're a leader in this youth group." I was like, "What? I don't know what that means." Because I was kind of an introvert, always. And he said, "We're having a youth service on this particular Sunday night. The pastor's out of town. Would you do a sermonette, like a short devotional?" And because one of my initial impulses is always to say yes and please people, which I found out later was because I'm an Enneagram 7.
Okay.
But I had this sort of impulse, like, yes, I'll say yes. And then it was terrifying. I didn't know what I was like, why did you say yes? I started praying for the stomach virus like that week. I was just hoping anything would knock me out of it. And so I ended up giving this 11-minute sermon on John 3:16 that I would totally object to now.
Sure.
But at the end, when there was sort of this invitation and people were responding, there was sort of this moment for me where it was just sort of like, I don't know what this is, but I want to do this again. And I think this is a thing that I feel like I want to give my energy to. But I was also, again, my experience was so bad with pastor and all that.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, please.
Can you give me 2 interpretations of that event? Can you give me the real cynical version? And can you give me the real charitable version of that experience that you had?
Giving that first sermon?
Yeah, and sort of the subsequent feeling of like, ooh, I want to do this.
Cynical version, I've always been an introvert. I said some things in front of people. They responded and said they liked it.
Yeah.
And I was always sort of a wallflower and I got attention, which I think is unfortunately how cynically a lot of pastors end up doing what we do, right? Is attention. We like attention. the charitable version, and I probably land somewhere in between most
Right.
days, but
That's
the
why,
charitable version
yeah.
is that experience was for me a sort of an awakening to this thing that I had been not wanted to be a part of, but yet that maybe I had something to say in a way that would be helpful for people. And of course, the ultimate charitable version is this is what God is calling me to do with my life.
Yeah.
And of course, I grew up, and again, I'm Southern Baptist, so the only thing you needed to become a pastor was like zero training, just a calling. And the calling was like, can you sit on the stage and spout off the Baptist faith and message, which they gave you ahead of time to memorize. So, like, super cynically, I got into this for terrible reasons. But I mean, the reality is, I was really an introvert back then, and the being in front of people was terrifying to me. And so there just was this sense of, I don't know, like maybe the way maybe I have a sort of a gift, and then I was taught to minimize it also. Like, so if you gave a good sermon, like it wasn't me, it was the Lord. So there was all these
I
mixed
remember
messages.
that. Yeah. Like we didn't know how to take compliments from people. We didn't know how to receive.
And I still don't.
Okay. So that's
Like,
still hard for
I don't
you.
know if you remember this conversation. We had this conversation at Wild Goose like 4 or 5 years ago where you and a couple other people were talking to me about this presentation I gave. And you're like, it was really good. And I was like, oh, it wasn't great. And you're like, no, it's okay to accept a compliment. And I was like, actually, I don't think I can. My body revolts at this. Like, I don't. So, I mean, we're sort of trained and taught, if anything good comes out of you, it's God. And if anything bad comes out of you, well, duh, it's you. As opposed to like, I'm actually decent at a thing in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Some years later, here we are.
Yeah. How do I say this without any sort of, there's no judgment there. There's just curiosity. Like on that exact point, I forgot we did talk about that at Wild Goose. Do you feel like you're getting better at that? And only when I say better, keep in mind here, again, it's not a judgment. It's I think it's healthy and good for us to receive compliments and to practice like that. And I'm just find myself like, do you think you're better now than you were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? Or because the body, like you said, up here, you can be like, I get it now. I understand, but the body's still going to revolt. Is that still a real struggle point for you?
Ish. Well, here, now I no longer argue with people about it.
Oh, that's huge. Okay.
Like before, I'd be like, "Are you sure that was good?" Because I can give you it. And I don't know if you still do that. Like I still do this. I've been preaching 23, 4 years. Oh, this is my 24th year probably of giving sermons, and I still finish them and go and like do sort of the dissection, the autopsy of it, and what could have been better, and what I wish I'd have done better, and what I wish I'd have I should have hit that point differently. I don't do that with people anymore. when they give a compliment, I'm just somebody sent a message today. I put out a new piece today on my site, and somebody wrote like that was really helpful, and I was just able to say thank you. I'm so glad it was helpful, and be genuine about it. Like I really like the idea that I could create something, whether it's a sermon or something I write or whatever, that somebody would read that and go, like just one person would read that and go, oh my gosh, that was meaningful to me.
Yeah.
That still blows me away that that's a possibility. And so now my general approach to that is gratitude, with no need to sort of like defend why I get to be here or why I get to say that or why they get to say that. Like there's just sort of the sense of, I'm just grateful that something I create may be helpful.
Pastor Joshua Scott, that's amazing. So can we just stop for a second and acknowledge that actually the easy answer to my question was yes. I have grown a lot in that area.
I've grown a lot in those 5 years or whatever it was. We were in North Carolina together.
That's freaking huge. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I want to stay with that just for a hair longer, because can we just stop and talk about for a second what it says about our idea of God when we think and or assume and or believe that God's preference is that when a human does something lovely in the world, that God really wants that person to immediately give God all the glory and take none of it for themselves. What does that say about our idea about who God is in your
It
mind?
says that God is an egomaniac.
Yes.
I can
Yes.
remember being in college when the Passion movement was a big thing, like
Yeah.
starting.
Yeah.
I remember listening to those sermons from Lou Giglio of like, the most important thing is to make God's name famous. I'm like,
That's
how
right.
much more famous does God want to be?
Yeah.
Like at some point, you've achieved, you're pretty freaking famous. Like everybody knows about you. Whether you exist or not, everybody knows your name. And so
And
it
everybody
really
has
is a
like
God.
everybody has like cool pet names for you, nicknames for you. Like, isn't that the sign that you've made it, that people like have their so
Yeah.
many fun nicknames
Yeah.
God gets?
So that God, I mean, again, I just have this, like the God I grew up with. And I gave a sermon at Wild Goose this year. And one of the things I said in the sermon, I deeply believe is true. If the God that so many of us grew up with, the God who is so about God's reputation, the God who, if you don't believe the right things about this God, will send you to hell forever. Like, I feel it incumbent upon me to choose hell out of protest and in solidarity with everybody who's getting the shaft. Because that God ultimately needs to die. That God needs to go away. That God is
Absolutely.
not good for the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Real egomaniac. I often think about, and it's not a perfect one-to-one illustration, but I think it's close enough to think about how Jesus would, in a couple of his sort of trying to get people to understand what his experience with God was like. And he would talk about like, which of you would, when your child asks you for a piece of bread, like would give them a stone, or like, and if even you as relatively decent parents can manage a somewhat healthy relationship with your child, then how much more than like level up the way in which God is like a parent unto us. And I think about like one of my sons right now, his name is Huck, and he is obsessed with electronics. Not like video game electronics, but like the actual components of like resistors and batteries and wires. Like his birthday is coming up and he just wants wires and batteries and conducers. And he just loves to build contraptions and power light bulbs with his own wiring. And he just sits there and reads books about electronics. He's like 9 years old. Like 9 years old? What am I, just sort of rounding? No, he's 9 years old. He's precisely 9 years old. And I just think about like the other day, he took this cardboard box from Amazon and he cut out a little tiny hole in it and put like a pencil eraser in the hole. And on the backside, put a paper clip, taped the paper clip to two ends of wires. One wire went to a little LED light bulb. The other wire went to a battery, which was wired to another battery, which was wired to a resistor that he had to explain that the resistor is to help not overload the light bulb. And I'm like, oh, cool. I had no idea. And then it loops back around. And so what it is when you push the little eraser button, it touches the paper clip on the other end to the wire and it like lights up the light bulb, right? So his own little device and basically what we're saying about what we think about God is for someone to say, Huck, that's really amazing what you did there. That is so cool. For Huck to be like, all the glory goes to my dad on that one. No, it doesn't. I did nothing. I literally could not have done less to do it. Like I did not touch. I don't want any of that. No, buddy, you did this whole thing for you and you did it. Like feel good about that. You don't need to pass any of it off to me. Anyway, that's a longer story than it needs to be. But I just think if we ever, thank you. You're affirming that it was longer than it needs to be.
No.
I was thinking the same thing. But just, I think it's worth it sometimes for some Christians, maybe most Christians, to pause and think, what is it we're saying about God? Even specifically in this topic of like worship. And I was thinking about this lately, Josh, like, I don't know how you feel. I'm curious. What do you think about worshiping Jesus? And if that feels too vulnerable of a question for you to answer with some of your church people watching, you can do whatever you want with the question.
Not at all. Gracepointe is the super safe space. Here's what I think about worshiping Jesus. I think he would be appalled.
I think he would be appalled too.
I don't think that was ever his goal or ever the point. I think Jesus' goal was that we would be formed into certain kinds of people who did a certain kind of, who were certain kinds of humans who lived a certain kind of way in the world. I don't even think Jesus would be embarrassed. I think he would be appalled.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember a number of years ago reading something that Soren Kierkegaard wrote where he talked about, his sense was that Jesus wanted followers, not worshipers. And he pointed out that like each time people attempted to do something akin to worship, he like redirected them, but what it does in the church world, when we worship something rather than commit to following something, we can keep that at a distance. It is far more safe, far less threatening and impactful for me to worship Jesus than it is for me to attempt to be a disciple. When you worship someone, you're just like, oh, I'll say great things about you. Look at you. You're way out there, unattainable. You're this deity. But then when you try to be a disciple, you got to get right up close. And you're like, oh, crap, I got to actually sort of figure out what you did and how I can do the same thing. Way more challenging and threatening and vulnerable and scary. So we end up worshiping Jesus. And I'm with you. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Because at our church, our quote unquote worship ministry, Kate and I have been talking lately, like, what's a different way we can talk about that? Because I don't know that word really accurately depicts what that time is or what we do. But anyway, we can talk about that later. But I'm thinking about that, like, I don't know that we sing really many songs, if any songs anymore, that have to do with worshiping Jesus, because I feel like I've just sort of, without really thinking about it, grown out of that. And now when I think about it, I'm like, I have to get the same sense you do, that Jesus is like, this is weird. This is not at all what I had in mind.
Let's not do that. I mean, when people ask, what do you do at Gracepointe? I would say, I think when we sing, our focus is much more horizontal than vertical. I mean, our goal is to open us all up to whatever we're going to be experiencing, and opening ourselves up to whatever this reality is that we call God, whatever we like, to open ourselves up to this Jesus we're going to talk about, who's going to invite us into the world to be certain kinds of people. So I think about, I don't use the word worship. I would say, at our Sunday gatherings, we try to cultivate awareness together.
I like that.
So that we can go be certain kinds of people in the world that live and engage in a more just, generous, and compassionate way.
Can I, let's stay on this worship thing for a second, because I'm intrigued by it. I'm going to attempt to put a article on the screen that I read the other day. Let's see if I can get this to work on the first try. I'm not going to. It's going to be that. And then it's going to be, where's the show Safari? And then I want to custom, and I'm going to resize. All right. Look at this. On the fly. We are making stuff happen, people. Okay. I don't know anything about this person, Craig Greenfield, but I, for some reason, came across this article. And I'm just real quick, look at this. So there's an Old Testament scholar, Michael J. Rhodes, who recently tweeted a glimpse into his research on the top 25 Christian worship songs after spending months studying the Psalms. Here are a couple insights about the top 25 Christian worship songs. Number one, justice is mentioned only once in the top 25 songs right now. In contrast, the Hebrew word for justice, mishpat, can be found 65 times in 33 different Psalms. Number two, the poor, I'm sure this is a shock to you, are completely absent in the top 25. By contrast, the Psalter uses varied language to describe the poor on nearly every page. Number three, the widow, refugees, and the oppressed are completely absent from the top 25. The orphan gets 2 mentions, one occurrence as a spiritual orphan. I laughed at that. Number four, whereas enemies are the third most common character in the Psalms, they rarely show up in the top 25. And when they do, they appear to be enemies only in a spiritual sense. Number five, maybe most devastatingly in the top 25, not a single question is ever posed to God. Mm-hmm. The top 25 never ask God anything. Prick the Psalter and it bleeds the cries of the oppressed, pleading with God to act. Anyway, the rest of the article is actually a pretty decent. So if people want to read, it's craiggreenfield.com. But again, I don't know anything about Craig Greenfield, so don't come at me if it turns out he's not worth recommending. But that article I thought was interesting. Now, mind you, I don't think we at Sojourn have done one of the top 25 worship songs for years. So we've been out of that game for a long time. Yeah. But but it was really stark and shocking for me to sort of be confronted with how, maybe you could say it like this, how little the current slate of worship music is reflective of what at least the Psalms, and maybe we don't have to glorify the Psalms. It's not like they're the most perfect thing either, but to have like no mentions of justice, no mentions of the poor, asking no questions of God. Anyway, it got me thinking about, we have a lot of songs that need to be written for us to sing in our spiritual communities.
And that's one of the things we're actually really trying to take seriously and do at Gracepointe.
Really?
Is try to, like, how do we create songs that we can sing with integrity, that we don't have to edit, that actually speak to, I mean, look, the reality is the reason mainstream Christians can't sing songs that would be reflected in the hymn book of the Bible is because their churches are acting in ways that actually work against those things. Right? It's hard to sing a song about the poor.
That gets a DJ air horn. not for,
it's hard to talk about refugees when we live in a country where just the other day, images come out of our border patrol whipping Haitian refugees with actual whips. So how do we sing about that when our churches are generally populated by people who want to build a wall? I mean, it's hard to sing. It's hard to sing those songs, and it's also hard to ask God questions when you're afraid of the answers, or when you're not comfortable with the fact there will be no answer. And so, I hope that communities like ours can start producing the music that gives voice to the movement we're a part of, which cares about all of those. I mean, I know, I listen to enough of your sermons to know, and Kate's sermons to know that y'all care about those things.
Yeah.
The very things that are left out in the dominant strain of Christianity are the things that in progressive Christianity we're really trying to center ourselves on and hear voices from those margins. And so, it's, we sang, it was Pride Weekend in Nashville last week, and we got rained. We only had one day of it. We got rained out the second day, but so we sang "Born This Way." That was one of our songs in our gathering Sunday.
Love it.
And we don't sing a lot of songs that I don't even know what those songs are. I don't listen to Christian music outside of and we don't sing a lot of Christian music at church either. So I don't know what's out there. I just know it probably doesn't fit with what we're trying to do in the world.
Yeah. Good thoughts, man. Actually, on that point, you recently hired a musician to be a staff person, but you ain't calling him a worship pastor. No. What are you calling him?
So we recently brought Webb on staff.
Yes,
and Derek is
it's Webb with two B's.
Two B's, and we have a brilliant music and arts director named Ricky Brady.
Okay.
And if you've never heard Ricky, he's just an incredible talent. We brought Derek on, and there's a whole story about how this happened. It was just sort of by chance that he and I ended up meeting together every month and then every week. And then, so we call him the director of content and curation.
Okay.
And so part of what Derek will be doing is helping us write those songs.
Oh, wow.
And part of what Derek is doing is making sure that the voice of hopeful doubters, agnostic, those sorts of folks are present, because those are people who are part of our community as well.
Yeah.
So we wanted to give a voice to those people who are part of our community, who matter, who can ask some of those really powerful questions.
Wow. That's really exciting. I followed a little bit. There was a low key situation with regards to your church and bringing on Derek and this gentleman out there who I don't know, just loves to poke people like you, who seem to take real issue with you with Gracepointe bringing Derek on staff. And I know you know that of which I referred to. We won't give it any more airtime than that because it's not worth it. But what that leads me into asking is, how do you feel as it relates to the sense that it sometimes feels like, as a progressive Christian pastor, we almost exist in this territory where no one is going to be 100% on board with what we do.
That's right. That's, Colby, I literally, when that situation was happening, I was going like, wait, I think we're close to on the same team here. Like, I'm for you. I have no desire to convert you. I just want you to be happy and flourish. And there is this sense of progressive Christians exist in this no person's land between, fundamentalist conservative Christians and then folks who are, I don't know what to call it, but the fundamentalist left, which, I hope didn't exist because it operates under the same energy, the same steam as the conservative right. Yeah. It has better, in my opinion, theology and politics generally, but it's still the same steam. And I just don't have any, I'm like, no, this is not the goal. But I think that there's been so much trauma and wounding done by religion for people that, for lots of people, they either can't fathom. I get why people would expect us to be in the bait and switch business, right? And this whole thing with, I talk to pastors all the time who are I literally have had conversations where people are so if we become an affirming church, we'll lose a bunch of people that week, but the next week a bunch of people from the LGBTQ community or allies will show up, right? I'm like, no, you have to prove that you're trustworthy.
Yeah.
Because people have been bait and switched for so long.
Right.
So I get, and some of the hurt people express on that. I'm like, that is so much about their own experiences and their own wounding. And so I don't take it personally, but I did realize throughout this whole situation, we're kind of in this weird liminal space where it's possible that we end up getting strong opinions against us from both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. Kate and I have talked a lot over the years how we can give a message on a Sunday morning and from half the church hear the feedback of oh, I'm so glad you spoke from the Bible today. Well, actually, that would just be a sermon that I give. I don't know that Kate ever speaks from the Bible. I'm so glad you spoke from the Bible. I missed the Bible. That felt really good. And then the other half of the church is can you maybe not talk about the Bible? Because that was really activating for me. And then the very next week, do a message in which you don't talk about the Bible, and it just, the roles get reversed. And there's the people it's oh, thank God you didn't talk about the Bible. And then the other half, oh, I wish you would. And this is not a complaint. I love how you started with naming that there is a lot of trauma in our pews for very good reason. I mean, the reasons suck. I'm saying it's rational that trauma exists.
It's very valid. Yeah.
Yes, very valid. Thank you. That's a better word to say. But it can feel at times like it's really hard to walk the space of in this progressive Christian world of people who still find great meaning and value in the Jesus story and the Christian heritage, as well as holding space for those who have really sort of graduated beyond organized religion and yet still long for a sort of community of some sorts, serving and trying to create a community with those two groups of people isn't easy. It isn't easy. I don't really miss the days. I was going to say I sort of miss the days. That's not true. I'm just trying to say there was an ease back in the days when you just had your evangelical program. You're we know what we're doing here. We're moving people along to make a decision for Christ, and then we're moving people along in a discipleship journey so that we can get them to memorize Bible things and answer theology questions, and then we move them into serving the world, and then ta-da, we've moved down the thing. Yeah. And now it's a little less clear what we're doing.
It is, and there's no way. What I do appreciate about it, it acknowledges the fact that all of this is inherently messy because we're all at different places and different phases, and we've all had different experiences. I remember when I started at Gracepointe, I'm sort of like you. When I give a sermon, it's generally going to be grounded in something from the Bible. Now, a very different take on it probably, and it's going to have, I hope, better theology than I would have given 20 years ago. But I remember after the first couple of weeks, somebody came up to me and said, is this going to be a regular thing that you do? I was like, what do you mean? Give sermons? No. Use the Bible. It's wow, that's just what, this is what I do. This is how I do it. perhaps. And so sort of what I said to them was like, I hear you.
Yeah.
And how about we stay in conversation about this and give me a couple months and let's see if it's possible for you, this to be different. And it was, it was a good experience. Like they came back and said, hey, can we talk more about the Bible? And like personally, I want to just have some conversation about this. But I realized that that's tough for some folks. And what I think about when I think about the work I want to do is for people who have been completely just harmed and the Bible's been weaponized against them, I have no desire to say to them, you really need to read the Bible every day.
Yeah.
You may not need it at all. You may need to get it out of your house. What I do want to say is if you have been hurt by this and you feel grief around it, I would love to help you be able to come back to it in a way that might be healing. Because I really, there's some stuff in the Bible we just need to name as stuff that needs to be left in the past. It just is. And that is not a slam on our ancestors. They were doing what they knew to do in the moment.
Yep.
But there are things in the Bible that give us the trajectory forward. And to be able to bring that out and say, look, this has been used and abused and mistreated and mistranslated and misinterpreted. But what if we were able to at least offer it back to people in a way that is healing, if they want it. And I understand some people don't want it.
Yep.
And I also wouldn't say to people, like, I realize that part of our community's job is to provide rootedness for some people and to be a launch pad for others. And if our job for some people is to help them move out of religion in a healthy way, then I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Like our job no longer is to build the big thing and hold all the people and get all the money, right? Like our job is to care for people well.
Yeah.
And if people need to move outside of the Christian tradition, then I want to help them do that in a way that it can be a really beautiful breakup where they say, a lot of this has been healed. I don't need it anymore. It's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I don't assume everybody needs it.
Beautifully said, Josh. I think that's a great spot to end it, that we are attempting to be places that can provide a sense of rootedness for some and a launch pad for others. Well said. And I think you do that really well. I think you hold that tension really well. I think you lead with that posture really well. It's an honor to be your friend, and it's an honor to do this work alongside of you. Many of our colleagues have gotten out of the game for all sorts of good reasons, and I wanted to ask you why you're still in the game, but we'll have to save that for another episode because I like PCPC, and I might bring you back. I will bring you back.
I love that.
All right, bud.
I love it, and I love you, and I miss you, and it's so good to see your face.
Likewise. Thanks, man. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Well, I had a blast with that. Like I said, maybe it was just for me to talk with another progressive Christian pastor, but I got the sense, and I was watching some of your comments, that you appreciated it as well. So I think I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to find some other folk that are in this work, and I'm going to invite them on, and we're going to talk about it. I think these are conversations that are really important for all sorts of reasons. So anyway, thanks for hanging out with us today here on the altar. Next week, I'm really stoked because Danielle, aka Elle Dowd, is coming on the show, and Elle has a new book that is releasing or just released. I can't remember the exact release date, but it's called Baptized in Tear Gas. Check out the subtitle. From White Moderate to Abolitionist. And Elle has this incredible story of this life-changing event when she was a part of the protest after the officer in the Michael Brown killing was not convicted, and she changed her life, and now she is all about the abolitions. And so she's going to be on next week and talk about her new book. So please come on back to the altar next week and join me in that. And then that's pretty much all I got. I'm going to go get ready for our Survivor party. I'm going to continue to celebrate 5 years of Unclobber. Don't forget that tomorrow I'm going to do a giveaway. So follow me on Instagram and follow the directions, and I'll send one random person a free copy, and then one of their friends whom they tag also a free copy. Other than that, I love you all. Be well. We'll see you next week.